This is Matthew Hamilton, and today we're going to be talking about the Harlem Renaissance, which was the
Also the
black
president of the
movement
group.
trying to bring out the creative side in everyone, including blacks. It was intellectual, social, and artistic explosion. It was a black movement centered in Harlem, Manhattan, New York. It was an upwelling of creative output by African Americans. I chose Nikki Giovanni, who was an American poet, civil rights activist, and a writer and a commentator on television, and she was part of the Black Arts Movement. Nikki Giovanni is a poet whose poems helped to form the American voice of the 60s and 70s. This block quote is basically stating how if we're not going to be equal with each other, black or white, sharing land and claiming territories and things like that, then why have a land or land masses in the first place? This poem is showing like the perspective of a black and how if you became famous or became known and got out of the situation you were in this case was slavery or being harassed or abused. Basically, it's telling how when they were famous back then, they wouldn't like talk about your childhood because that'd be considered a disgrace at the time. And this poem is stating how people didn't look back at their past because that was supposed to be the harsh times. But in fact, that was their best times that made them who they are. But whites at the time didn't want to look at that. Nikki Giovanni was influenced by the civil rights movement and black power movement, which was a stringent time, and her literature shows the view of spirituals and equality through peace in the world and brings out black pride. Portrays Nikki Giovanni portrays black power through poems to the youth, shows the perspective of a black consciousness, uses metaphors to get her point through. Nikki Giovanni had a major part in the Black Arts Movement, like I said before, and uprooted the hopes for African Americans, in which some of theirs were brittle. Their hopes were brittle. She was an archetype for destined poets.
Hello, my name is Joshua. For our presentation, we're going to be doing the Harlem Renaissance, which was basically an upwelling of creative output by African Americans, and it shifted how many people saw African Americans. So, the poet I'm going to be focusing on is Dudley Randall, who was a poet, obviously, and he was involved in the Black Arts Movement. He was a modern poet who brought a bridge between earlier black writers and the Black Arts Movement because his work combined ideas and forms of poetry from the Harlem Renaissance, which is how he influenced pretty much early black writers. And yeah, he had many ideas from the Harlem Renaissance. So this is a block quote from Dudley Randall. I'm going to read it. I saw dawn upon them like the sun, a vision of a time when all men walk proudly through the earth and the bombs and missiles lie at the bottom of the ocean, like the bones of dinosaurs buried under the shale of arrows. Dudley Randall. Alright, so Randall started poetry after he had served in World War II, and this was right when Harlem Renaissance was starting to occur. So Dudley Randall was a poet who lived in an environment where African American culture was being promoted through poetry, jazz, and literature, which is how he was influential. So the influence of African American culture was an outcome of this. Lastly, the Harlem Renaissance brought a platform for African American culture from which the Black Arts Movement and poets such as Dudley Randall thrived through because of their influence in culture and contributions.
The Black Arts Movement, or BAM for short, was an African American-led art movement which was active during the 1960s and 1970s. The movement was based on the cultural politics of black nationalism. The movement wanted to create a populist art form to promote the idea of black separatism. The movement had many writers, and among them was Sonia Sanchez. Sonia Sanchez was an American poet, writer, and professor who taught about black writing and unity and white oppression. Some of her work included plays and books that had to do with the struggles and lives of Black America. Her writing established her importance as a political thinker to the Black atheistic program. Sanchez gained a reputation as an important voice in the Black arts movement After publishing the book of poems Homecoming in 1969, the collection demonstrated her use of experimental poetic forms to discuss the development of Black nationalism and identity. Sonia did not start off thinking this way. During the early 1960s, she was an integrationist, supporting the philosophy of the Congress of Racial Equality. But once after hearing Malcolm X speak, Sanchez became more separatist in her thinking and focused more on her Black heritage and identity. She would then go on to advocate for the rights of oppressed women and minority groups.
Hi, I'm Diego. I'm the vice president of the group, and this is my branch on community. Here's the thesis. The Harlem Renaissance brought a new age of African American media. The movement was not confined to the boredoms of Harlem, however, but it did serve as the epicenter of the cascade of influential music, literature, and art. The Harlem Renaissance took place all over New York and led to the careers of many famous African American artists. Duke Ellington, a composer, brought to life many of the themes of Black culture through his singing and music. And in New York, Black theaters sprung up all over. Blackface was one of the more popular acts of the time, but it wasn't allowed in such theaters. Here is my branch on tools, my thesis on Sam Cornish. He used his knowledge as a longtime educator to produce books consisting of his poetry. One of his 8 books, An Apron Full of Beans, New and Selected Poems, is said to have a wide appeal, an appeal to those who've never witnessed the 20th century art, and also to those who have fond memories of such art. Here's Sam Cornish's poem, Spring of 1931. It sheds the light on the life of an African American in the early 20th century. The average impoverished black man of the time did not have much to do of any importance other than work. Perhaps the frivolous nature of the northern black boy in the eyes of white Americans was cause for change and a more fragrant way of expressing themselves. Here's my thesis for outcome, start of a new branch. The Harlem Renaissance came during a time of unrest in the U.S. The First World War had occurred, bringing the U.S. into the Roaring Twenties. This, however, also eventually led into the Great Depression and then gave way for a movement in American history. The Harlem Renaissance allowed black artists from all over America to reveal their true colors in the art form. More on Sam Cornish. Because of his literary work as a poet, Cornish was given the title of the Poet Laureate of Boston. Some of his other achievements include the NEA Award, St. Botolph Society Foundation and Award, and the Somerville Arts Ibbotson Press Lifetime Achievement Award. Cornish also read to the Boston masses at the 2010 Boston mayoral inauguration. Here's a quote Sam Cornish gave in an interview.
You don't know how I feel tonight. You don't know. Oh, my feelings are strong and bright.